Welcome back, Potterheads. Here's the continuation of the fan fiction, The Festival of Lights. If you haven't listened to the first part yet, make sure to check it out too. As the fireworks finale painted the sky in dazzling bursts of gold and crimson, a discordant tremor rippled through Harry. It wasn't just the magic in the air that felt amiss. A premonition of danger, a whisper of dread, coiled around his heart like a serpent. It wasn't just the magic in the air that felt off. It was the sudden tightness in his chest, like the breath of danger whispering too close. The festive noise seemed distant now, his focus sharpening as his instincts screamed at him. Years of chasing dark wizards had honed his senses, and this was more than the usual unpredictability of magical gatherings. The festive hum of the crowd dimmed, the joyful clamour replaced by an eerie silence. A cold shiver, sharper than any summer chill, snaked down his spine. He instinctively reached for his wand, his gaze immediately drawn to Ginny beside him. She noticed, as always, her expression mirroring his own apprehension. "What now, Potter?" she inquired, her voice laced with concern. "That saving the world look again." Before he could respond, a nearby stall erupted in a shower of sparks. An ancient artifact, etched with cryptic runes, began to glow ominously, its malevolent energy seeping into the crowd like a noxious gas. Vendors scattered in a flurry of panicked cries. A young witch stumbled over a fallen lantern, her wares spilling onto the cobblestones. Children clung to their parents, their faces a tableau of terror. Harry's senses honed in on the disturbance, the chaos a mere backdrop to the escalating threat. This wasn't mere disruption. It was a predatory force, feasting on the fear it engendered. The ground beneath the artifact buckled, and a monstrous entity clawed its way free, a wraith of shadows, its eyes burning with malevolent fire, tendrils of dark energy lashing out. "Bloody brilliant," Ron muttered, stumbling back, a bag of roasted skewers clutched in his hand. "Can't we go one weekend without unleashing some ancient evil?" Hermione, ever the pragmatist, was already halfway to the artifact. "It's bound to that object," she declared, her voice urgent. "We must contain the curse before it spreads." "Care to be more specific?" Harry pressed, his gaze fixed on Ginny. "Or are we just winging it again?" "I'll enlighten you when I decipher it," Hermione retorted, her tone clipped. Ginny stepped forward, her wand poised. "Fine. While you decode, we'll keep this spectral menace occupied. Come on, Harry." He couldn't help but admire her. Her bravery was not a facade, but an innate fierceness. It was a reminder of the woman he loved, the unwavering fire that always burned within her. A pang of fear, the fear of losing her, pierced his resolve, but he quickly suppressed it. There was a battle to be fought. She smirked, her eyes alight with mischief. "Bet you can't hit it before I do." "Is everything a competition with you?" he retorted, though his heart pounded with a mixture of apprehension and a thrill of anticipation. "Only the ones I'm destined to win." She grinned, her stance already shifting into a fighting position. Luna, who had been observing the wraith with an almost ethereal serenity, spoke up. "It's a nightshade wraith. They are drawn to potent emotional energy, such as anger or fear. Or fireworks," she added, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "They are often misunderstood, but terribly dangerous when provoked. Poor thing." "Yeah, poor thing," Harry muttered, as a shadowy tendril lashed out, narrowly missing him. "Luna, any advice other than trying to give it a cuddle?" Luna tilted her head. Distract it with light. Wraiths hate purity. Maybe you could use that Patronus of yours, Harry. It always seemed warm. Ginny arched a brow. Oh, he's warm, all right, when he's not brooding. Focus, Harry said quickly, fighting a smirk. The battle unfolded with chaotic elegance. Harry's stag Patronus charged at the wraith, its silvery light illuminating the dark creature and scattering its tendrils. Ginny was a blur of fiery hexes, each spell precise and effective. Harry couldn't help but admire the way she moved, so fierce, so unyielding. Merlin help him. She was breathtaking when she was furious. "Eyes up here, Potter," Ginny called, her voice tinged with teasing. "Don't get distracted." Harry tore his gaze back to the battle, heat rising to his face. Distracted? Of course, he was distracted. She had this maddening way of being both infuriatingly confident and utterly captivating, and it always left him slightly off balance. He shook his head, forcing his focus back to the wraith. Ginny's bravery wasn't new to him, but it still managed to take his breath away when he least expected it. He grinned despite himself. "Who's distracted? Just wondering if you could hit something without all the dramatics." "Want to find out?" Her tone was challenging, but her lips quirked into a small smile. Meanwhile, Hermione shouted directions as she and Neville worked to dismantle the artifact. "It's tied to the wraith. If we break the enchantment, the curse should end." "Great!" Ron called, hurling a skewered sausage at a stray tendril. "Any chance you could hurry that along?" "Ronald, if you'd—" "Not now, Hermione!" Another lash of shadows tore through the air, and Harry instinctively grabbed Ginny's wrist, pulling her out of its path. The movement brought them closer than necessary, his arm brushing her waist. She looked up at him, her fiery hair catching the glow of his Patronus. "You always this handsy, or just when there's danger involved?" she asked, her voice low but teasing. "Only when you need saving," he shot back, though his grip lingered a second longer than it should have. She didn't pull away. "Well, don't get used to it," she said, her tone softening. "I'm not a damsel, you know." "You never were," he replied, his voice quieter. The connection hung there, charged, until Hermione's shout broke it. "Now, everyone, get clear!" A final burst of magic shattered the artifacts, sending the wraith into a swirl of dissipating shadows. The air stilled, the oppressive energy lifting. Around them, festival-goers cautiously returned, the chaos fading into murmurs of relief. Later, as the festival resumed and their friends rejoined the crowd, Harry and Ginny wandered to the lake's edge. The adrenaline from the battle still thrummed faintly in Harry's veins, a persistent echo of the danger they had just faced. He glanced at Ginny, watching as the faint glow of the lanterns reflected in her hair. She looked calm now, composed as ever, but the memory of her hexes flashing through the dark and the determined fire in her eyes lingered in his mind. The thought struck him again, sharp and unrelenting. What if he'd lost her? The idea of a world without Ginny Weasley, without her smirks, her fiery quips, her unwavering strength, was unbearable. He clenched his fists briefly, then exhaled, willing himself to let the tension go. She was here, alive, and as infuriatingly confident as ever. The fireworks reflected on the water in ripples of light, and the night felt calm again. Harry ran a hand through his hair, glancing at Ginny, who was leaning against a tree with that maddeningly composed air she always seemed to have. "You all right?" he asked. "Are you?" she countered, her eyes sharp but warm. He hesitated, then sighed. For a moment back there, When that thing turned on you, I thought—" "Don't," she interrupted, stepping closer. "Don't do that to yourself. I'm not some fragile flower, Harry." "I know," he said quickly. You mean a lot to me, Gin. More than I think I let on." He paused, the words catching slightly in his throat. Opening up like this always felt like walking a tightrope. Vulnerable, unsteady. But with Ginny, it was different. She had this way of making the world seem brighter, less burdensome. And when she was near, the shadows in his mind receded. He glanced at her, wondering if she truly understood how much of his strength came from simply knowing she was there. Her gaze softened, and she tilted her head. "You're terrible at this whole feelings thing, you know." "Yeah," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But you're worth it." "Obviously," she teased, her lips curving into a grin. Then her voice dipped lower, softer. "And you're worth it too." For a moment, the world narrowed to just them. Her fingers brushed his hand, deliberate and warm. He took it, lacing their fingers together, and the simple act felt like grounding and electricity all at once. "You're lucky I love you, Harry," she said, smirking as she leaned closer. "Otherwise, you'd be an absolute nightmare." Harry couldn't help but grin, the warmth of her teasing cutting through the lingering unease from the battle. Her smirk, her confidence, it always had this way of grounding him, reminding him that no matter how chaotic his world got, Ginny was his constant. It wasn't just her wit or her fire, it was the way she saw him, really saw him, and still chose to stay. He felt his heart settle, the tension in his chest easing, as if she'd cast a charm on him without a wand. He laughed, the tension in his chest loosening. "Yeah, well, I'll take my chances." As the lake shimmered under the fireworks, Harry felt the weight of everything, his fears, his doubts, lessen. With Ginny by his side, he realized, the darkness wasn't so daunting. Together, they were unstoppable. The end. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas to everyone.